Hello and welcome to Culture Vultures. I'm Sandy Frye, your host. Our creative director is Nancy Cole, and this is a program that examines arts and culture around Tampa Bay. Not long ago, I attended a talk given by Kenny Irby at the Tampa Museum of Art. Mr. Irby, who is Poynter Institute's senior faculty on visual journalism and is also director of community relations, spoke about Henri Cartier-Bresson, who was a pioneer photographer in France and whose goals and whose work commend much praise even today. Mr. Irby founded the Poynter Institute's photojournalism program, and since then he's also become community relations director, and he moderates talks within the community and consults on leadership, ethics, and diversity. Welcome. We're really pleased to have you. I enjoyed your talk I think it was in January, and I was very interested to note that this evolution of photography really began at the turn of the last century, but has been going on at an almost enormously rapid pace ever since then. Tell us about Bresson to begin with.
Well, Bresson is one of the founding fathers of photojournalism. He really did help not only in terms of technologically to master the use of the single lens 35 millimeter camera, but he also brought some strategy and practice to the work that he has eternally been endeared for, because he brought the idea of the decisive moment. He coined the term that still photography was a way to encapsulate a single moment in a broader story, and that the interaction of human beings, he really he humanized photography, which had historically been more of a fine art practice, and was really about portraiture as opposed to real experiences and interactions that people had. And he also, I think your opening comments, I mean, he was a journalist. He really made, along with his colleagues that founded the first major photo agency, Magnum Photos, they established the independence that photographers had ideas as visual journalists, and had the capacity and the wherewithal to be able to tell those stories apart from the narratives that writers and editors may have wanted. So he really, in many ways, in those particularly those three areas of the technology, the practice, and the independence of actually allowing photographers to direct their own destiny, if you will, and to preserve their own copyright.
Oh, that's very important.
Absolutely.
Very, very important.
Absolutely.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I know that there were cameras during the Civil War. Matthew Brady took a lot of stills, which was probably about all you could do with equipment that heavy. When did the camera become a useful, portable instrument? And I think it allowed photographers to supersede illustrators, because the newspapers and magazines used to have illustrations to go with the articles and news.
Absolutely. The illustration was the original art form or artistic expression, visual arts in printed publications, and even down to the Wall Street Journal still using the stempel images, which they took photographs from. Those original images were hand drawings. And as they've made the transition and technology has become so wonderful, they've been able to come up with a process that will take a photograph and then digitize it and re-output it in that way. But you know, still photography has been around since the late 1800s, like 1884. But the process was so cumbersome. The large cameras, you'd see the large format cameras, the photographer with the tripod and the cloth that you had to go under the cloth and make the image. And so most photography was still portraiture. It was not active until The early 1925, around that time, German cameras, the Leica, became a possibility, and in the 30s, it moved to a point of perfection. I think Leica produced their first camera in 1914, and it took about 10 years for folks to begin to really see it as an option. And in the 1920s, it really did start to take off and became a game changer in media companies, and particularly in print publications and magazines and newspapers.
Was there simultaneously any training for photographers in colleges or in vocational institutions?
No, absolutely not. That's that's a great question. The reality is there's been a short period of real intense education and acknowledgement of the power of photographic storytelling, which we would call photojournalism. That goes back to the term coined by Cliff Edom at University of Missouri, one of the other founding fathers of photojournalism. But it wasn't until the 50s, the late 40s, early 50s, that people started to think, that there's more to just snapping pictures. There's a process, there's an ethic that is applied. There's a strategy that's not unlike the writer who is reporting facts and information, particularly in that day in writing. But photojournalists could be reporters with cameras who were striving to be as accurate to the individuals and the experiences that they were witnessing, and as true to that documentation and the sharing, the publishing. And so you had universities that really took on this as a craft area, like University of Missouri and Syracuse, Newhouse School of Journalism. The big three have always been Missouri, Syracuse, and Columbia. And so that it was in that period that photojournalists were able to really start to be practitioners. But the early pioneers didn't have that kind of foundational teaching where they were taught composition and perspective. They were really responding off more of an instinctive drive inside of them, and a wisdom that they had about lighting and composition.
So a lot of it was simply
Self-taught.
Self-taught, and actually probably an ability and sensitivity to such elements as lighting, position of the subject, etc. I want to tell our listeners that before he came to Florida, Mr. Irby was photo editor of Newsday in New York, and in addition to that, he cooperated in 2 Pulitzer projects, which I'd love to have you talk about.
Well, I chair the Pulitzer. Well, the process is you are a juror first, and if you're lucky and fortunate enough, you're asked back as a chair. And so that was my experience, and it is a phenomenal experience that is hugely challenging. If you can imagine your desk, or a desk twice the size of the desk that we have here, just stacked about 3 feet tall with portfolios, and a group of judges are given the charge to go through and find the best work of that year in the area of 2 areas: feature photography and then spontaneous news photography. The Pulitzers in photojournalism have 2 categories of awards. And it is not only a single image, but it can be a series of images. They're both evaluated against one another, and they are simply, your guideline is to find the most compelling and well-executed body of work for that year. So it's about a 2.5-day process with lots of vetting and banter amongst the judges that are usually a panel of a chair and 3 other individuals from around the country.
And literally hundreds of...
Yeah, several hundreds.
Several hundreds,
yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Well, in addition to that, you did something with the Olympics as well.
I've been fortunate, very blessed to be a photo manager at the last 2 U.S. Olympics, beginning in '96 and in Atlanta, and then in 2002 in Salt Lake City in Utah. I ran the boxing venue in Atlanta, and I had the great challenge of running the Ice Palace, which was where there was.
Was this in Utah?
This was in Salt Lake City, yeah, where we had Apollo Ono and Ice Skate Gate, and you had all the challenges, all the news at the Olympics that year were in my venue.
Oh, how interesting. That's really interesting. We had been talking about iconic photos that just endure, and actually when people think of, let's say, the Korean War or Vietnam, there are certain images that come to mind, and they are invariably photos. Can you tell me what makes an iconic photo?
Well,
and how do you arrive at it?
That's a question that's been asked to me many times in my 18 years at Poynter. You know, the iconic image is the image that reverberates in the mental photo albums, my own definition, of the society that encapsulate an experience that was of great interest and great importance for the viewing public, if you will. It's the image that summarizes a major experience in a period of time. And so more often than not, I find that people are most attracted to defining iconic moments of war because most citizens don't see war. And it is the courageous group of individuals who put their lives and livelihoods on the line to be able to bring that story to the world. Right. And so in the United States, there are some iconic images that we as Americans focus on, and then there are international images that focus. And in every culture, you know, the society, the people, you know, determine those iconic images. But those images invariably capture huge emotion in a single image, whether it's 9/11, whether it's the Olympic thrill of victory or agony of defeat, you know, Usain Bolt crossing the finish line. It is, you know, there are these images that go back. You were talking about, you know, the Dorothea Lange photos, you know, from the Farm Security Administration. There are images throughout time that are both historic and important, and then well executed. I mean, I think you can't discount the craft level that goes into the image that stands the test of time.
Is it true that the early photographers started as portrait photographers?
Many did. Bruhsong started as an artist. He was a painter. He grew up in France. He was well trained in a well-off family. And his family sent him off to Paris to learn the finer arts of high art. And he grew bored with that and wanted to have a more, as he shared in many of his biographies, he wanted to have a more realistic experience with life. And because artistic painting, more often than not, was more about the imagination, whereas photojournalism as an art form is really about the reality.
Yes.
It is about the human interactions, capturing those moments that are sometimes highly volatile and exciting, and oftentimes subtle and quiet. And Bruhsong was one of the photographers who covered a wide spectrum of events, from war to the early unfolding of Indonesia. He was in India when Gandhi was assassinated. So, I mean, he had all of these kinds of experiences that he covered, and yet one of his most famous pictures is the puddle jumper. It is a picture of an individual with an umbrella jumping across a puddle. That has wonderful reflections of both the jumper in the water, the reflections of the gating. I mean, I see that picture. It is one of the images that most universities use, both in terms of journalism and high art, to teach composition from.
Right, and it also illustrates what you had spoken of in your talk about him, that he advised all photographers to wait and wait and wait until the moment.
Patience.
That's right.
Patience.
And I'm sure he had to wait for quite a while to find the puddle jumper.
Exactly. I mean, the actual story is that he saw the image, he saw the composition, he saw the landscape, he saw the lighting, he saw the perspective, but it wasn't engaged, it wasn't electrified, it wasn't stimulated until the person came in. And I think that sets art away from journalism, because journalism is about telling the human story. And so in probably 98% of the images that you would find that are historically important or iconic images, they have people in the midst of that time or that timeless experience, because the moment it's documented, reality is captured and able to be re-experienced and represented and to be restudied by individuals for decades to come.
I was just thinking of the photograph, and I think it was a group of men who were showing up to get jobs, and their backs were to the camera, except for one man who looked older, and he turned away, and my thought was, he knows he's not going to be hired, and that was my interpretation of it, but I'm sure everybody has different reactions to it, and that is really, isn't it one test of the really creative photograph, that it can suggest so many things?
Oh, absolutely. You know, and the truth lies in the eyes of the beholder.
Yeah.
But in journalism, it is up to the photographer, the photojournalist, as the reporter, as what I call the authentic witness, to bring that context to bear in the captions, in written narratives, because that's really where the context helps reinforce the understanding of the image.
Right.
Otherwise, you know, the picture is very neutral.
Yeah.
Everyone could look at it and interpret it in their own way, but what's really important in journalistic practice is to contextualize that image with written narrative, with additional images, and that was one of the other things that Bruhsong was very successful at, was expanding the genre from the still image. He and Eugene Smith and Margaret Burke White, they were some of the pioneers, along with Gordon Parks and others, who really expanded the picture story idea, and Life magazine was a perfect forum for that style of photography.
I remember very distinctly opening a Life magazine as a kid, maybe 8 years old, and there was about 5 pages of the Grand Guignol Theater in Paris, which was a theater which represented sadistic plays, and there was some people taking out people's eyes and cutting their throats, and I was appalled, but I was fascinated. I can remember that very well. But it seems to me that photographers are facing greater dangers these days. I think the death rate for both journalists and photographers during the last several decades, particularly in fields of war, have become, it has been steadily rising.
Oh, absolutely. It is a dangerous pursuit, and yet it is still one of the most enrolled majors in universities today. The danger has extended beyond the fact that there are wars, but that's now what's called conflict zones, where there's tribal unrest, terrorist activity going on. And so, and the appetite for that work is much greater than it's ever been before, not just in terms of printed materials, but websites, broadcast, the multi-platform genres are now very much interested in using photography as a main content matter. The tablets, which allow individuals to engage photography and to scroll through. I mean, all of those engagement realities and new usages make the appetite and the desire for photography much higher. Now what you find is people are much more aware of the power of photography. There's some interesting overlaps that are happening in our society, while many more people are using photography. And I think often, I just wrote in an essay for a new book on 21st century ethics that I was asked to contribute to, you know, the idea of the Sprint commercial that says, it's called the Unlimited. You may have seen it, where the entry comes in and it shows people walking around with cameras, and it says there's 1 billion roaming photojournalists. Everybody who has a camera, an iPhone, a Droid, a digital camera has the capacity to tell stories and contribute to the stream of information. Now.
We have spoken about weddings where cameras are positioned at each table for guests at the reception.
Absolutely.
And it gives them, I think, that feeling that they know what they're talking about when they go to a photographic exhibit. They react to it, not necessarily in the same way they might react to paintings or sculpture or something like that.
And to return to your initial point, though, you go from something that is as pedestrian and as commonplace as a wedding, where photography is highly motivated and sought after, to a foreign country like Afghanistan, or in Nigeria, where now journalists are being targeted for having a camera. You can be detained. People have been murdered in Libya. You know, we lost several photojournalists internationally because, you know, on the dark side of these conflicts are trying to eliminate the sources. You know, the idea of photographers who share light or bear light in dark places for the world to be able to understand becomes an interesting dichotomy and reality that those, again, who do this work for more noble purposes of informing societies about the horrors around the world are much more target now.
Right. Let me take you, before we go any further, to the community dialogue. You had said that one of your goals is to, as we pivot into the 21st century, to talk about all the issues that will come up, have come up, and how we as a community can deal with them. What are you doing in that regard?
Well, Poynter believes that we as a society and we as a country, and increasingly free societies, as we do a lot more international work, are predicated on dialogue and not diatribe. Getting people to talk about the issues. We've spent the first part of our history as a school for journalists, for example, spending lots of time focusing on practitioners, educators, and leaders. And those practitioners have run the gamut from young children, middle school children, to college graduates. And now we're in an age where our transition is to become a school of journalism, and focusing on communities where we're helping individuals become more literate in media literacy, media understanding, and better sense makers of the volumes of information that are being inundated with. And so our community conversations have been an attempt to bring journalists from around the country into St. Petersburg and into the Tampa Bay area to be able to have these kind of conversations about their experiences, their ambitions and expectations, so that you can hear Tom Brokaw, or you could have heard Tom Brokaw or Dan Rather, you know, share some perspective on what their work has brought them to. You can hear Gwen Ifill have a conversation about, you know, what it's like to moderate a presidential debate. And so the one that we're doing that's coming up now is with Eric Deggans, who just wrote a book called Race Baiter, which is highly popular and discussed, and Reginald Roundtree, the lone African-American anchor here in the Tampa Bay area. And we're tying it to Trayvon Martin's murder, which we're in the anniversary of, and the kind of coverage that is happening around African American men. And it ties to the newest program that we have at the Institute, which is our Right Field program, a program that I have the great privilege of running as academic enrichment and mentoring program for middle school African American and Hispanic boys that are considered at risk.
Well, believe it or not, we have run our course, and I want to thank you very much for being our guest today.
It's an honor.
And if we go out, maybe we can go out with some of your images. Thank you for listening, and plan to join us again.
This is Billy when he was a baby.
He's so cute.
And this was his first school play. And this is Billy's graduation from grammar school. Wait till you see the videos I have. I have so many tapes. Let me find them.
No, I can't wait.
Wait till you see the potty training we did.
Mom, our VCR doesn't work anymore. We can't watch those tapes.
Oh. Kathy, now you can watch Billy's potty training video.
What do you mean?
I had all the tapes transferred to DVD at Tampa Bay Community Network. I didn't have to mail the tapes away, and I got them transferred very quickly.
G morning, sunshine. Wakey, wakey. Text me back.
You can figure out Jody's gonna
Hey, did you tell your parents about us? Let's skip first period together. Did you get all my texts? Is practice over yet? Where are you at? Are you with your friends? That's L-A-A-A-A-M-M-E-E-E. Capital X, lowercase o, capital X, lowercase o.
I love you. JK. I hate you. JK. Are you ignoring me?
We're in a huge fight right now. Is this something I did?
I can see your lights on. I'm coming over.
What'd you dream about? Me? I'm lonely. Holla back.
Holla back.
Let's try something new. Nude pics. Send me some. Text me.